Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Nicaragua webinar entitled, Why is Nicaragua Important in Today's World? We look forward to several speakers talking about their recent experiences in Nicaragua. And we also thank Yoav Elenevsky, who's providing our technical support today. We thank our many organizational co-sponsors who are being listed now in the chat. My name is Barbara Larkham, and I'll serve as moderator today. I'm the co-organizer of this webinar series along with Nan McCurdy, and I'm the current chair of Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. You'll see several buttons available at the bottom of your screen. One button is for closed captions. Just click on that to turn it on. Also feel free to use the chat function to offer comments throughout this event. But if you have a question for the speakers, please don't put your question in the chat or we may not see it. Instead, click the Q&A button and place your question there. After we've heard from all the speakers, we'll have a question and answer period, and we'll select questions from the Q&A to pose to the speakers. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing monthly series about Nicaragua. However, we're not scheduling a webinar for August. We will resume in September with an interesting fall lineup. Before we begin, we have several announcements. We'll make sure to post relevant information and links in the chat. If you'd like to become more active in supporting Nicaragua's sovereignty and opposing foreign interference there, please join the International Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. You can check the website regularly at nicasolidarity.net. Also, please put your name and email address in the Q&A if you would like to receive action alerts, the weekly newsletter, and monthly meeting notices. The next meeting of the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition is on Monday, August 14th. To save as much time as possible for the program, we're going to enter some other information in the chat about other ways that you can get involved or learn more about Nicaragua. The format for today's webinar is the following. First, we'll hear from Nan McCurdy with current news briefs. Then we'll hear from our invited speakers about their recent experiences in Nicaragua. The remaining time will be for questions and answers. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent to all registrants within the next few days. When it's ready, it will also be posted at nicasolidarity.net and on the YouTube channel of Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. And now to introduce Nan McCurdy, who will provide us with Nicaragua news briefs. Nan is the editor of the online weekly Nica Notes, published by Alliance for Global Justice. She lived in Nicaragua for over 30 years and continues to have deep connections there. Nan McCurdy, you have the floor. Nan, you're muted.
I apologize. That's a good way to hold things up. Thank you to everyone for being with us today, and I'm happy to be speaking to you from Managua, Nicaragua. The 44th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution was full of joy, with representation from many nations and thousands of Nicaraguan youth singing and chanting. President Daniel Ortega highlighted the national heroes whose legacies inspire the Nicaraguan people in their struggle for peace, struggle for social justice and economic development. He also recognized very clearly the role of solidarity, and that's all of you, which has remained strong even in the most difficult moments. He said, "We see and feel it every day when you write and defend the truth of the peoples, the truth of the revolutions, the truth about Nicaragua. Thank you, dear brothers and sisters." Hundreds of solidarity activists came for July 19th and were at the celebration. In closing, the president said, "We work to create a world of justice, lucidity, intelligence, fraternity, sensitivity, and joy. We want to see a world that knows and lives in peace, harmony, and solidarity. We want a better world. Long live Nicaragua. According to the annual World Economic Forum 2023 Gender Gap Index, Nicaragua ranked in 7th place worldwide in gender equality, and it ranked 1st in all of the Americas. Nicaragua has the strongest parliamentary representation in the world, with 51.65% of seats in its National Assembly held by women. Nicaragua is also #1 in women's professional and technical workers, women's educational attainment, women's literacy, and women in ministerial positions. Homicide Monitor found Nicaragua with the lowest homicide rate in the region, 7.3 per 100,000. Next is Costa Rica with 11.4, Panama 12.8, El Salvador 16.7, Guatemala 16.6, and Honduras 41.2. Nicaragua just launched a mobile app for earthquake alerts that the population can download to their phones to know seconds ahead of time when earthquakes are going to happen. On June 30th, more than 2 million citizens participated in a national life-saving drill for preparation and protection of life in situations caused by natural phenomena like earthquakes, floods, and fires. In 2022, the government continued the program to fight poverty and consolidate the path to economic growth. In 2022, 75.6 million was provided to small-scale agricultural producers, 51% higher than in 2021. GDP grew 3.8% and exports totaled 7.73 billion, 12.6% more than in 2021. The Adelante program to finance production and small businesses provided nearly $10 million to 5,360 small farmers and business owners between January and May to improve the quality and competitiveness of products and services they offer. During the national influenza vaccination campaign that ended at the end of June, 594,000 doses were given for a 99% compliance with the goal. Nicaragua has built now 25 new modern hospitals since 2007. Pardon me. And has by far the most hospitals in the region. Hospitals are under construction in León, Nueva Segovia, Bilwi in the North Caribbean, and 72 million is being invested in the Nueva Segovia Departmental Hospital, which will have 236 beds. Pardon me. 5 operating rooms where 40 surgeries will be performed daily. The government has established cultural schools in 280 communities where courses in areas such as dance, singing, choir, guitar, drawing, and painting are taught. More than 6,000 people are participating in the schools. The mayor's offices contribute to the restoration of the right to culture, guaranteeing art for all. The new Women's Technical Training Center of El Qua in Matagalpa will train more than 2,000 young women producers. It has research labs, training, and technology development areas to obtain better results for production. Work will be done on production of seeds, composting vegetable matter for coffee crops, non-traditional crops, and courses for agrotourism. US 3 million has been invested to expand the Messiah Technical Center so that some 6,000 students can have free quality training in technical areas. And another technical school, 1.42 million, was invested in the technical training school in Buaco, ensuring greater access to free and quality technical training for 3,000 students. In the first quarter of 2023, the Institute of Housing built 2,000 houses out of the 9,000 projected for the year. Thanks to all. Barbara, back to you.
Thank you, Nan. And now we turn to our invited speakers. The first of these is Susan Lagos. Susan is a retired Spanish and ESL teacher from California and also a retired farmer in Darío, Nicaragua, where she has lived for 19 years. She's a member of Friends of the ATC, which in English is the Rural Workers Association, and she just returned from the Caribbean on her 7th ATC delegation. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Gosh, I just also returned from the delegation for the 19th, so I just got back last night. Okay, talking about the delegation to the Caribbean. I've lived here, like you said, 19 years, but I really wanted to see the Caribbean. I had never been to the Garifuna area of Orinoco. I'd never been to Ramaki. And I was just so impressed. Number one, in Bluefields, we had quite a talk from a man named Johnny Hodgson. That's an excellent historian, even though that's not his forte. He was telling us about the history was so interesting. Basically, there were Mosquito kings started by the British way back in the 1600s, and they traded timber, turtle shell, and animal skins for metal, clothing, and liquor with the British. And then eventually there was a Versailles Treaty and the British left. I'm looking here for 1790. And that the British protectorate guy's name was Robert Hodgson, who is one of his ancestors. And he left several slaves too. He said, we don't want to do a DNA test because we don't want to really know which ones were his slaves and which ones are his legitimate children. There's a lot of Hodgsons evidently in Bluefields. And he was saying when he first started school in the 70s, his name is Johnny. And they said, you have to speak Spanish. You have to be Juan. And he didn't want to be Juan. And then when he went to school he was one of the few people that was able to go to school in Managua. And he said, everybody said, you can't speak Creole, right? You have to speak Spanish. So everything was pretty difficult. But then when the revolution happened, this whole change came for women also, as we've been talking with Nan. So I'm going to see if I can sing you one line of a song. He said it used to be song used to be brown skin girl, stay home and mind baby. And then it became pretty black girl, let's build a free country. So changed the whole attitude, right, about what women should be doing. And he explained how the education and everything was so different. It was much worse in the Caribbean. Illiteracy back in 2007, when Daniel came back into power, in the rest of the country was 30%, and it was 58% on the coast, on the Caribbean coast. For example, access to water in the rest of the country was 73%, and it was only 4% on the coast. Roads, we had 2,000 kilometers. The coast only had 140. So the road that we all went on over to Bluefields is probably 3 or 4 years old. And it's the first time Nicaragua's had that connection between the East and the West, which makes a huge difference. All the other countries in Latin America and Central America have that connection. Now we have it, and it's really important for trade. It's important for people to get their products to market. It's important for people to get to the hospital, work and everything. And I'm going back a little bit. He was talking about the Moravian. There's a Moravian church, I think originally was from Germany, but then in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, a group came down in 1841. And so there's a strong presence of the Moravian church in that coast. Up in Honduras, I've seen also. And they have an emphasis on education and healthcare. So they've been a good influence, I think, in the coast. I'm looking for one other quote I had here I wanted to give. Oh, he was talking about how there are so many cultures, right? You have the Garifuna that came from St. Vincent to Honduras and then down to Nicaragua in the early 1800s. You have Ramaki is another language that another person's gonna talk about. We have the Miskito and the Mayagna up in the north. We have Urwa, which is a new one for me, at the mouth of the Carawala River. There are just so many cultures. So when we went to visit Biku, which is the Bluefields Indian and Creole University, was started in 1991. But now, when we went to visit, I was just so impressed with how the classes are in Spanish, but there's 6 languages being spoken everywhere. I mean, they're speaking back and forth in Creole, and the people that speak Garifuna back and forth. And that was a whole incredible interview we had with Rodney, who was Garifuna from the town of Orinoco. One thing that Johnny Hodgson said that I remembered, he said, Christians that think that they're the only ones going to heaven, he said, you better get ready, because heaven's multicultural. If you're not multicultural, you're not going to be very comfortable in heaven. I thought that was kind of a fun thing to be saying, because Bluefield's definitely multicultural. Looking at my time, how am I doing?
You're at time, but if you have a
Okay.
few important points to make, you can finish them now.
Okay, well, I'll just say briefly that the Caribbean coast is an autonomous region. So being autonomous is a huge difference from the way it was before. He said, what is autonomy? This is Johnny Hodgson again. Recognizing your historical rights, having principles in the Constitution that support that, and then also national unity doesn't mean uniformity. It means everybody's got their autonomous government, and the taxes go 25%. Where did I have that? 25% to the municipal government, 25% to the local community, 25% to the national government, and 25% to the regional. So they get a lot of the local governments that are autonomous get support from the tax money, 25% each. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Susan. That was very interesting. Next, we'll hear from Arturo Nache. And Arturo is a recent high school graduate out of Chicagoland and a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, or PSL, who is seeking to aid the current revitalization of the American labor movement by becoming a union tradesman. Welcome, Arturo.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, so what can we learn from Nicaragua? Well, in this presentation, I want to stress 3 main lessons I learned from the Caribbean Coast delegation about the Socialist Sandinista Revolution. First, their systematic implementation of their food sovereignty doctrine. Second, the super advanced universal healthcare system that is people-centric and not profit-driven. And third, the profound connectedness of the FSLN party with the Nicaraguan working class that stems from the use of national historical figures to build a working class movement. Quote, La tierra no se vende, se recupera y se defiende. The land is not for sale. We recuperate and defend it. was a slogan I heard recurrently when I visited the Latin American Institute of Agroecology. My time at the Institute was spent learning about how food is produced in Nicaragua and how the FSLN revolution supports the peasant class in Nicaragua. I learned about the vast diversity of crops they managed to grow in their country, all in a way that is harmonious with Mother Earth, by making their own organic fertilizer, using crop rotation practices, and using natural pesticides. 90% of the food eaten in Nicaragua is grown in Nicaragua, and which clearly demonstrates that their socialist model is self-sustainable and truly embodies the words of Pan-Africanist revolutionary Thomas Sankara when he said, "He who feeds you controls you." So if you take a second and you compare that to the US agricultural system, a system focused on accruing profits in the pockets of multinational corporations, you see this precisely with the well-known Bill Gates, who owns 270,000 acres of farmland in 19 US states. So our land is being hoarded by a very small minority of agricultural corporations, while simultaneously over 40% of Americans suffer from health conditions related to poor quality of food that we eat, smothered in toxic chemicals, kind of artificial sugars and fats. So we see that there's a close correlation between consolidation of land in the hands of this tiny minority and the spike of disease and premature death because of the cancerous and toxic foods being produced. So in the final analysis, the solution remains the same as it has for a while, to put production in the hands of farmers and the working class, just as the Sandinista Front has done and continues to implement, so that the Nicaraguan working class can live long, healthy lives. The second point, healthcare. Healthcare in the US is grossly expensive and inaccessible to the masses. Americans are barred from knowing that in Nicaragua, after the Sandinista revolution and the re-election of Daniel Ortega in 2007, healthcare is universal and of high quality throughout the entire nation. Diseases such as malaria have been eradicated, and the FSLN continues to construct and renovate health clinics and hospitals and maternity homes, which has led to infant and maternal mortality being cut in half. And since health in Nicaragua is comprehensively analyzed and not an isolated field like in the US healthcare system, take, for example, if you're overworked and it's leading to a degradation of your health, American doctors can tell you to take 3 days off of work, because under capitalism, the bosses and the ultra rich only see us workers as commodities, and they control pretty much every aspect of our lives. So instead, they'll just prescribe us pills that numb the pain, but that doesn't actually attack the problem from the root, being work and alienation. So for this reason, we need to learn from Nicaragua and move towards a decommodified healthcare system, just as they have done, which has been super successful. The last topic being on the question of national nihilism and the importance of tailoring a socialist struggle in the United States to American working class. We must emphasize that combating this national nihilism is a precursor to both of the previous takeaways. And at this current stage that I previously mentioned of their super advanced healthcare system, as well as their agricultural food sovereignty doctrine. And at this current stage in the US, it must be addressed in order to build a strong labor movement that's guided by a vanguard nucleus. We have to combat this national nihilism that is very deep in the left in the United States. But to kick off this proposition, this is what Chairman Mao had to say about national history. Every nation in the world has its own history and its own strengths and its own weaknesses. Since the earliest times, excellent things and rotten things have mingled together and accumulated over long periods. To sort them out and to distinguish the essence from the dregs is a very difficult task, but we must not reject history because of this difficulty. It is no good cutting ourselves off from history and abandoning our heritage. The common people would not approve. So when we look at Nicaragua and the development of the liberation struggles there, it has appealed to the Nicaraguan working class by using revolutionary historical figures like Augusto Cesar Sandino, but not only in Nicaragua, in Venezuela. If you look at Hugo Chavez and the PSUV and how they've recaptured progressive legacy of Simón Bolívar in creating this Patria Grande. In Cuba, they used Jose Martí, an anti-colonial figure in the socialist revolution. But this strategy can be seen beyond Latin America and Africa and Pan-Africanist socialist struggles, or in the Middle East and pan-Arab socialist struggles, and so forth. So in America, I say it will be no different, because the history of the US is no doubt filled with genocide, slavery, imperialism. However, there's also a rich history of progressive struggles against capital, of labor solidarity, of abolitionist struggles, of women and LGBTQ rights. So we have to appeal to the American workers by recapturing revolutionaries in the United States, such as John Brown, MLK, Malcolm X, W.E.B. Du Bois. And when we use these historical figures, it gives our socialist struggle legs to continue fighting to help our Nicaraguans and Americans to develop a society of common prosperity and of cooperation, not sanctions and imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Arturo. Okay, next we'll hear from Agustin or Gus Guerrero. Gus is a socialist, an anti-imperialist activist based in the East Bay area of California. His current political work focuses on Palestine solidarity action with interests in food sovereignty, rural development, anti-imperialism, internationalism, and class struggle. Welcome, Gus.
Hi, thank you everyone for having me on this panel. Thank you, Arturo. That was really great. Thank you. I'm gonna kind of circle back and talk similarly to what Susan has shared about the Caribbean side of Nicaragua. And yeah, I'm just gonna say, prior to coming to Nicaragua, I had heard very little about the Caribbean side and the history of the peoples who live in the Caribbean. So being able to go there with the Friends of the ATC and learn about the rich diversity and cultural history, political history of the peoples in the Caribbean, who are primarily indigenous or of Afro descent, was incredible. And I think two experiences that really stood out for me in this was our visit to Ramaki and our visit to Orinoco. And Ramaki is an indigenous community that's part of the Rama territory in the Southern Autonomous Region of Nicaragua. It's the Rama territory encompasses a vast tract of land with around 9 communities, 9 different municipalities that have their own communal governments. But we visited one of those, the Ramaki Island, which is off the coast of Bluefields. And there we got to see what this idea of autonomy, what it looks like in practice. And as Susan mentioned, autonomy is a legal concept that was developed after the revolution that allowed trying to attempt to have national egalitarian development that would address these legacies of colonialism and discrimination on the Caribbean side of the country. And with Ramaki, what that looks like today in practice is there are various public institutions that are run by Rama peoples in collaboration with different various levels of government that collaborate to the national, to regional, to communal level governments. And through this effort, the Rama peoples are able to benefit from the development, from the egalitarian development model that was created after the revolution. And through this, we see that the Rama people now have hospitals that serve Ramaki Island residents and are run by Ramaki people. They have public education that's run by Rama peoples for the purpose of educating Rama peoples. And they have different public institutions like justice systems and medical offices and things like that that help develop a population and help ensure that the population can go forward. And I think one particular point that was felt something that stuck with me was how the Rama peoples are using their educational system to promote Rama culture and preserve their language and culture. Something that was only possible through the Sandinista revolution, through the creation of the autonomy law. And through this, you see how the socialist development model is actively working to overcome these contradictions of discrimination and racism within the national history of Nicaragua, to put forward a new chapter of its history, a future where multiple different peoples can exist within the country of Nicaragua to build a more egalitarian and socialist society. And similarly, when we visit Orinoco, which is an Afro-descendant Garifuna community, also on the coast, we saw how the autonomy law and the practice of autonomy has benefited the masses of the Garifuna peoples in Nicaragua, and that they have control over their various public institutions like schools, medical centers, law centers, things like that. And how I think one fact that was striking was that in Orinoco, a community that's existed for, I think, over 100 years, if I remember correctly, only began to see formal public education in 1967. And at that time, the public education was being administered by missionaries. But after the autonomy law, after the revolution, there began to be the creation of public educational systems in Orinoco, in these Garifuna communities, as well as the greater Caribbean coast communities. And through this, the Garifuna peoples have been able to produce students who go on to be the doctors, who go on to be the lawyers, who go on to be the judges, who go on to be the police, who go on to be the university professors, who all work towards building a nation and a Caribbean community that is integrated and is able to work towards this common goal of building an equal and socialist society. And I think that was something that was very striking, was being in the Caribbean coast, we see how everyone is able to practice their culture and feel proud of their national cultural heritage, while at the same time feeling like this is something that makes them more Nicaragüense. This is something that contributes to the Nicaraguan national culture, national history. And this is something that they feel will make the country go forward. Whereas thinking about the US, we see that our own history of colonization, a lot of people feel like these issues can't be addressed through the government. Like our current realm, our current political possibilities, we know that are totally exclude any ideas of like egalitarianism or, thinking about building an anti-racist future. And that, that's something Arturo mentioned is, it's our job to be able to build those horizons past what seems currently possible. But in Nicaragua, these communities, the Garifuna communities, the indigenous communities, understand that this revolution has happened and it's them carrying out the revolution every day, and that they work with the national government and with their local governments to ensure that the people keep developing, that they keep going forward. Whether it's a new solar panel system that provides 24-hour electricity in the community of Orinoco, or new roads, or a language program that allows them to practice their language and keep it. It's all part of this project to ensure that Nicaragua is an intercultural and egalitarian society. And I think to touch on why this is relevant, I think, in this world right now, we're seeing like a large, especially in the Western countries, a large push towards reactionary to fascism, to racist, holding on to racist ideals, to anti-immigrant politics. And I think Nicaragua offers a model that is socialist, but is also a model that is working towards addressing these contradictions that have existed over hundreds of years of colonialism. And I think this is something that we need to look for, like we need to learn about, we need to hear about, we need to visit, because it offers such an inspiration for us in the US, but also in other countries as we try to make our own societies more egalitarian, as we try to address these issues of racism and discrimination.
Thank you, Gus. That was great. And now we'll turn to Mairead Skian Gillis. Mairead is a young activist social worker from Boston and a member of the Workers' World Party. She traveled on a solidarity delegation to Nicaragua this month and just got home. She went there to learn about the current situation in the country and take part in the celebration of the 44th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution. Welcome, Mairead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and for coming together to talk about Nicaragua. We got back less than 48 hours ago, so it's still fresh. And I could talk for hours, but what I mainly want to focus on here, because there will be more opportunities, is the overarching goal of the Sandinista Revolution of La lucha contra la pobreza, the struggle against poverty, which shows how important Nicaragua is because it's a strategy of development and community involvement that's relevant and should be modeled by the entire world, with socialist attributes of always seeking to improve day by day the conditions of the working class, with the people's needs and voices at the forefront. So in, a couple of examples of that, we were shown examples of that all throughout our experience there for 10 days, starting with the health and education systems that are free and accessible to everyone across the country, as well as people coming to the country, with the campaign of Mi hospital es mi comunidad, my hospital is my community, which not only brings people to healthcare, but brings healthcare to the people in a variety of ways, with community programs happening inside of these hospitals, with greater development of healthcare resources for the people, in solidarity with other countries that have come to help build up the healthcare system here, such as people from Cuba, as well as home visits, bringing healthcare to more at-risk communities, to elders, to women and children, to people that can't necessarily make it into hospitals to receive care. The care comes to them, and that's something that we participated in learning about, and seeing how grateful the people were that their health was being monitored and tracked and prioritized under the revolution, especially during the COVID pandemic, at its peak, but also still in its current iteration, where monitoring the health of the people and bringing educational resources to them about how to protect themselves and their communities was a top priority. We also learned about the energy projects happening in the country, with increased affordable access in the last decade, from less than 50% of access to electricity to now over 99.3% today. And all of that information is transparent and accessible to the people, where they can learn about where their energy is coming from and request greater resources. And we also learned about how this system is adapting to climate change and the global climate crisis, with investment in solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal energy. So we visited a geothermal plant while we were there, located at the Momotombo volcano, where we were learning about how this renewable, clean, constant energy is extracted in a sustainable way and pumped to Managua and pumped throughout the country to really keep the climate struggle at the forefront while also meeting the needs of the people. Another example was the financial investments under the Sandinistas for development, with a priority in social spending and spending on the resources and infrastructure that the people need, including hospitals and schools, parks. We visited the largest park in Central America for children, as well as investment in healthy food and potable water being pumped into communities and schools. We learned about investments that I've been talking about for climate justice on a global scale. And we learned about excitement about mutual collaboration with China and other countries that are showing solidarity with Nicaragua, for instance, with the Belt and Road program, to bring, more opportunities into the country for free trade and jobs and access to resources. And we learned about, how the added threats of sanctions are serious and scary, but emphasize the need at the same time for stronger international relations with other countries in solidarity with Nicaragua, because the Nicaraguan people will move forward despite whatever obstacles are being thrown at them, especially by the US government. We also participated in a variety of meetings with labor around the country, particularly based out of Managua, including teachers' unions and energy workers, tourism workers, even right at the top of the volcano that we visited, hotel workers right at the place that we were staying, health unions represented by women by 80%, farm workers that take part in the ATC, and just how powerful the workers really are and how the needs of the workers are met through these unions, which are extremely prevalent and make it possible to fight for better conditions, such as pay increases that are negotiated every 6 months in the country. We did cultural touring, including learning about indigenous traditions of oral tradition and pottery, and revolutionary commemorative art of both Sandinista revolutionaries in the country, as well as heroes from around the world, such as Fidel Castro and Salvador Allende, and how this is, both an educational program as well as a beautification program, so that the people live in a beautiful place and their art and their work is on display for everyone to experience. And then, of course, we were there for the 19th as well, the celebration, the 44th anniversary celebration of the revolution. And we heard
Mairead, 1 minute, okay.
Great, yeah. The speech that Daniel Ortega gave was both anti-imperialist and internationalist, with special recognitions given to Palestine, to Burkina Faso and other African nations, Asia, countries across Latin America. And we noticed just how powerful the youth are in the country, of being the future generation of those that are carrying out the revolution. And this experience was definitely an international solidarity experience, with delegations meeting from around the world, showing unity across borders, not only with the Sandinista revolution, but also with struggles happening in countries across the world, to build a global working class movement. So I hope everyone here gets the opportunity to visit. Thank you for listening. It's a powerful place to be, and it gives us inspiration to continue the struggle here at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mairead. Next, we hear from Danny O'Brien. Danny is a member of Workers' World Party living in Portland, Oregon, and he works as a case manager at a homeless shelter. He's also an artist and writer, and prior to his politicization, he was in the U.S. Army in the Air Defense Artillery Unit. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you for having me on. I think my biggest takeaways from this trip were sovereignty, self-determination, a whole lot of international solidarity. And then I was really impressed by how the Sandinista government organizes and mobilizes projects. And I just want to talk about kind of two examples that stuck out to me about this. So like Mairead was saying, we met with a bunch of union workers, and as part of that, we met with a workers' assembly, which is the highest grouping of unions and union workers in the country. And this is the FNAT, the Frente Nacional de los Trabajadores, the National Front of Workers. And it's organized to be, there has to be at least 20 workers to be a union, 1,000 workers in a federation. There are 3 to 4 federations in the central, and then all of the centrals is the FNT. And the FNT is a political role. We listened to very dedicated anti-imperialist and international solidarity speeches from these workers who are hold this important political power, but at the same time continue to do their union work. They're not detached from their actual labor. At one point during one of the meetings, one of them had to step away a little bit earlier to go negotiate for a union of miners. And then so other than this, for this kind of organization and mobilization, something that was very interesting to me, also in regards to self-determination, was listening to the queer community in Nicaragua, which interestingly, they refer to themselves as sexually diverse communities. And this is a direct, with the direct intent to not import terminology from the West. They as opposed to just, calling themselves LGBTQ+, they have their own term for it. The Sandinista government puts out primers that they distribute to the people, talking about issues of gender and sexuality, acceptance and anti-discrimination. They've put laws in effect. It is mandated that a doctor, if you see a doctor, they have to respect your gender identity. And if they refuse to do this, there are 3 month financial or employment punishments. And then if they misgender or disrespect your identity again, they are at risk of losing their medical license. Hate crimes are a very serious offense. And we met with just people talking about this and acceptance, how they organize, how there are sex worker unions and programs for the sexually diverse community. And then another thing on this that I thought was very interesting as a social incentive is they have, for 4 years now, they have had a program called Miss Belleza Gay. It's a gay beauty pageant. They call it Miss Gay Beauty is the translation. And it was just a few weeks before we got there that they had their 4th annual. It's for trans women in Ciudad Sandino, outside of Managua. And the winner of the pageant gets to make a social project proposal that they can give to the government. And if it's approved, they get funding to enact this, which I think is excellent for empowerment of these communities. And that just with that and with cultural history of machismo, I think it shows that there is a lot of effort and effective struggle to fight against this machismo. With those programs, with gender equality, they have specific police departments that are staffed and run specifically only by women to respond to issues like when it's women and children, so they don't just send a very masculine officer to deal with something that would not be appropriate. And that there is just this awareness and want for empowerment and this excellent and efficient mobilization for all manners of things like this. There are other primers put out about different social issues, people talk about it, they organize, they come together and organize together, and are just aware of these issues. So I think that, and just hearing so many statements about international solidarity at every step of the trip, was just very eye-opening. It's a wonderful country with a wonderful revolutionary spirit. And yeah, I hope all of you guys get to go.
Thank you, Danny. Okay, next we'll hear from Camila Escalante, who is the editor of Causatu News and a correspondent for Press TV Latin America. She's currently in Managua. Welcome, Camila.
Hey guys. All right, thank you so much to Nan and Barbara for inviting me today. Since I've had the opportunity to visit Nicaragua now on several occasions, I wanted to take this time to speak about the advances of women in Nicaragua under the Sandinista Revolution. Nicaragua is one of the most gender equal countries. Well, it's the most gender equal country in Latin America and one of the most in the world, undoubtedly, in recent years. And according to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2022, it's ranked currently number 7 worldwide. So to help summarize some figures, I will refer to an article in Nika Notes written by our friend and comrade Becca Rank, who many of us know from Casa Ben Linder and Jubilee House, and the article is titled, "We Are No Longer Fighting for Space, Women in Power in Nicaragua," and she penned this one in March of this year. So I'll go a bit into that, and of course, Nan started us off with some of these important figures as well. Nicaragua has managed to create a historically egalitarian government ranked number 5 in the world in political empowerment of women. What's unique to Nicaragua is that women in positions of power are mostly workers, peasants, and many of them are indigenous and Afro-descendant. There's a 50-50 mandate that is very key and that has been adopted by other countries such as Bolivia, of course, with great success. And Nicaragua in 2012 on International Workers' Day passed a law requiring 50% of elected positions to be held by women, and half of all candidates must be women. This is, of course, the case for the vice president and the president, as well as for mayor and deputy mayor. And Becca points out that women currently represent more than 50% of the judicial and executive branches of government, the National Assembly, mayors, counselors, and many other positions. Some of us who've had the opportunity to visit Managua in recent years have been able to interview the president of the Consejo Supremo Electoral, who is Brenda Rocha, a very important figure of the government, who has been Sandinista since her youth. She's now the president of the Electoral Authority. And we also spoke to many of the magistrates and can confirm that everywhere in government where I've sought interviews and to have these discussions with different officials, that women are represented in 50% of all of these different areas of the government and its institutions. This, of course, was not possible during the neoliberal period before the return of President Daniel Ortega in 2017. And it's important to say that the women who are represented include indigenous and Afro-descendant women present at all levels, national, regional, and local government, and both autonomous regional governments are led by indigenous women. The National Assembly of Nicaragua is consistently within the top 3 of the most gender equal legislatures in the world, and this figure can be found and is updated every month on the website of the Interparliamentary Union. It's up there with Cuba, and actually Mexico and Bolivia rank within the top 15, but Nicaragua is always within the top 3. And in the backdrop of these incredible achievements is that Washington is constantly rearing its head into Latin America, the Caribbean, and the global South, using the pretext of women's rights and human rights broadly. And but in fact, the United States, Canada, and much of the global North is seeing losses in terms of women's economic rights, in terms of women's right to healthcare services, and in many other areas, particularly since COVID. The sort of the troubles with the economy has been disproportionately affecting women in these countries of the global North. And meanwhile, in Nicaragua, women continue to make substantial gains. So that's just to say that the exporting of this US false model of human rights to countries like Nicaragua should not be accepted for a minute. Those of us who've been able to join the Friends of the ATC on some of their delegations have had the opportunity to visit the Gloria Quintanilla Women's Coffee Cooperative, located in the mountains outside of Managua. They talk about the importance of now having houses, having property titles to land, among many other things, access to loans and financing, and the ability to start up their micro businesses. And I know I'm running out of time here. So some of my work I'll post in the chat here to hear more about the government's commitment to bettering the lives and conditions of Nicaraguan women. On a recent trip last year, I sat down with National Assembly lawmaker Irma Davila. She's the president of the Commission for Youth, Women, Children, and Family Affairs of the National Assembly of Nicaragua. I transcribed that article. I also spoke to Minister Justa Perez, who is the president of the Minister of Family, Community, Cooperative, and Associative Economy, known as MEFCA. And we also published a really good transcription of a lengthy discussion between Margaret Flowers and Jill Clark-Golub, which is called Nicaragua's Run by Women with a Revolutionary Feminism. It's a really good interview. I think they were just back from a women's delegation, or a delegation that focused on women's here in Nicaragua. So I'll post those links below. So thank you guys so much for the invite and for your time. And I also wanted to remind everyone that we have started these new social media accounts for our Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll post those in the chat as well.
Thank you, Camila, for your presentation, and also for the reminder of the other social media that were not mentioned yet at the beginning of this webinar. So I'm glad you're going to post those. Okay, next we will hear from Larry Fisk. Larry organized solidarity activities in the 1980s, including a sister city project in 1988 and an electoral observation team from Tucson, Arizona in 1990. He continued formal and informal electoral accompaniment in Nicaragua after the return of the FSLN to power. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. I would just like to focus, excuse me, I'm suffering from COVID, voice is a little bad, but I will do my best. I think Nicaragua has been, is, and will be important. For one thing, its inherent importance just in its geographic location as a connection between the Americas, North America and South America, and its importance as a connection between the Caribbean and the Pacific. I believe Nicaragua has been important for a long time historically. Of course, suffered from Spanish imperialism till 1821. And then with the 49ers during the California Gold Rush, traveling through Nicaragua, and then the interest in the canal. William Walker, filibusters in the 1850s, defeated in the mid 1800s. Excuse me again. Then there was attempted revolution in 1912 against the Diaz presidency and the U.S. Marines, which resulted in the killing of Benjamin Celedon and a young Sandino, seeing the body being pulled through the streets and inspiring his revolutionary fervor, which led to his resistance from 1927 to 1933. And by the way, I knew a man, Bill Gandal, who was a Marine in Nicaragua during that period when he was 19 years old, and he told me, we raped, we murdered, we stole. He did change and became a left-wing labor organizer and a supporter of revolutionary Nicaragua. Sandino's struggle, of course, drove out the Marines, but then with his assassination, long period of repression. Then the FSLN forming in 1961, long, bloody, difficult revolution, finally resulting in the triumph of July 19th, 1979. Unfortunately, Sandinista had about 2 years to take progressive actions before becoming victim to US imperialism again in the terrorist Contra War for almost a decade. The defeat of Daniel Ortega in the presidential election of 1990, leading to the neoliberal period, excuse me, and a resurgence of poverty, illiteracy, disease. And then in 2006, with the re-election of Daniel Ortega, we entered this second phase of FSLN governance and all the amazing accomplishments we've seen since then. And I can say for me, what's happened in this period has been the closest thing to a miracle that I've ever experienced in my life. The changes in people's lives that I've known, amazing. And the others have addressed that very well. And in 2018, of course, the Tranques and another attempt by the US imperialism to crush the Nicaraguan revolution and the aspirations of the Nicaraguan people. But ultimately that resulted in another defeat of the US. So I'd kind of like to put it in the historic context that with plenty of setbacks and lots of pain for the Nicaraguan people, there's a history of defeats of US imperialism. In the 1850s, Sandino driving out the Marines, the triumph of July 19th, 1979, the coming back to power by Daniel and FSLN in 2006, the overcoming of the coup attempt in 2018. These are repeated triumphs of the Nicaraguan people. And this is important, and it's important moving forward to have an example of a people who consistently, persistently struggle for their national sovereignty and are able to triumph and come out smiling, really. To put it in the international historic context, I believe Nicaragua has always been important. Of course, in Latin America and the Caribbean, there's been the historic struggle against Spanish imperialism, then US imperialism. And of course, there was indigenous resistance to the Spanish conquest, such as by Nicaragua and in Nicaragua. And then in Venezuela, you had its attempted revolution against the Spanish led by Miranda, which failed, and then Bolivar, and as mentioned by Arturo, Martí in Cuba, and then Sandino in Nicaragua, who of course informed the Castros and Che in Cuba, Chavez, probably Evo. So there's a continuum, an irrepressible impulse in Latin America and the Caribbean for revolution, anti-imperialism, for people to be free. And I believe Nicaragua has always been integral to this process. and is a protagonist of international solidarity, as previously professed by Bolivar and Sandino, and which is totally necessary to defeat the forces of U.S. imperialism.
Larry,
Am I done?
almost. Yeah, can
Okay.
you wrap it up? Okay.
Yeah, okay. So now I just feel that Nicaragua is poised to move forward with its deepening relationships with Russia, China, and other international relationships to be a nexus for international trade, and that Nicaragua is ready to benefit from and contribute to the multipolar world that we see emerging.
Thank you so much, Larry. That was a great overview, historic overview there. Okay, our final speaker is Erica Takeo. Erica grew up in Portland, Oregon, and she's been living in Nicaragua since 2017. She's part of the International Relations Secretariat of the Nicaragua Asociación de Trabajadores del Campo, which is ATC, or Rural Workers Association, and she's coordinator of the Friends of ATC Solidarity Network. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Also, thank you to Nan, to Joel for all the technical support, and to all of the amazing speakers who spoke before me. It's not an easy task to speak after all of them, but I'll see what I can do to add on to what everyone else has said. So like Barbara said, I am part of the International Relations Secretariat of the Asociación de Trabajadores del Campo, or Rural Workers Association, which is an historic organization here in Nicaragua that has existed since before the triumph of the revolution and was involved in the overthrow of the Somoza dictatorship, the agrarian reform and redistribution of land, which Arturo speaks so eloquently about, and today the defense of this very important revolution, of which we are now celebrating its 44th anniversary. So I did want to say just a few things, both about the Caribbean Coast delegation, and hopefully I can jump in and say a few things about July 19th. So one thing I wanted to say is that the ATC doesn't really have a base on the Caribbean coast. But as a solidarity network, we wanted to be able to learn about the process of autonomy within the context of the construction of national unity and the Sandinista revolution. So we were really fortunate to be able to coordinate there with the regional government. And I think one thing that really impressed me was that as part of the autonomy process, that part of the autonomy law, all of the different ethnic groups are represented in the regional government, in addition, of course, to being part of their communal government and the territorial governments and the municipal government. It's very much being carried out in the regional government, and I want to extend a thank you to the regional government for being able to receive our visit. I think we were also very much able to see the construction of an intercultural Nicaragua. We heard that concept talked about by Comrade Johnny Hodgson, as well as when we went to visit the Bluefields Indian and Caribbean University. And what I think really touched me, even though I've lived in Nicaragua since 2017, was seeing how on the Caribbean coast, young people, both at the high school we visited in Orinoco, which is one of the main Garifuna communities, as well as students from all of the ethnic groups of Nicaragua at the BICU, the university, were proud to be who they were. They were proud to, they were able to express freely and openly their identity and not feel like it's something that they needed to hide, which I think most of us growing up in the States never had that freedom to do so. And so that was really impressive to see that people could speak in their language, speak about their culture, and be really proud of their culture, and that is something that makes Nicaragua richer. And so that was really something that I took home from that experience, and would really encourage folks to be able to get out to the Caribbean coast whenever they can, whether it be on a delegation or to visit as a tourist, etc. And then to talk about July 19th, we had a small group of visitors with ATC, and we were also very fortunate to get to interact with the other delegations that were around. We got to meet Mairead and Danny and Larry, and 3 takeaways from that celebration that I also think link up to the time that we had on the Caribbean coast. First of all, I think we could really see the example of Nicaragua being one of the leaders in the construction of, as Larry just said, a multipolar world. and a multipolar world that is also, like Mairead said, anti-imperialist, internationalist, and I think multicultural. We saw so many different countries represented by both their official delegations, which I don't have time to read off all of the names, and also the international solidarity delegations. And it was a really beautiful moment to be able to witness the 44th anniversary of the revolution. I think the second thing, takeaway from both the visit to the Caribbean coast and well as these July 19th celebrations is the importance of knowing our history. I think so often in the hegemonic culture, they want to erase all these things about our history, but then we don't know all of these histories of colonialism, of imperialism, but also struggle of all of these leaders who have been able to, who have organized towards the emancipation of our peoples. And Nicaragua, Larry just gave us such an excellent historical overview in a very short amount of time. And Comandante Daniel Ortega also gave an excellent overview of history of anti-imperialist struggle, as well as many heroes and martyrs of Nicaragua, including some internationalists like Roberto Clemente, who have accompanied this struggle that really isn't just 44 years long, but is many, many years longer than that. And we need to understand that history to continue to move forward. And then, last but not least, the reflection from July 19th of the Caribbean coast was something that Daniel said. He thanked the young musicians who played at the July 19th ceremony and who have been on tour throughout the country in the past month. And we also saw amazing music and dance by young people on the Caribbean coast. And so the importance of music and dance and culture, but also of our juventud divino tesoro, our youth, our divine treasure, as Ruin Daria would say. And I think also today and today's talk, we also heard some really amazing voices of young people who are going to help us carry this solidarity work forward. And I think that it's something that we're trying to do in the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition and Friends of the ATC. And I really was just blown away by the testimonies of the young people and the young people at heart who have spoken today, and want to thank them all for speaking. And I have 10 seconds left. So I just want to say also a special salute to the Sandinista Front, who today is celebrating their anniversary, founded on July 23rd of 1961. And I think we're still continuing to see the construction of this really amazing revolution today, thanks to the FSLN. So thank you all for having me and for having all of us today, and turn it back over to you, Barbara.
Well, Erica, you were very timely there. Thank you. Well, I just feel very grateful to all 8 of our speakers today. You each said something different, and everything that you said was so right on target, I think, and very interesting, and gave all of us an overview of your experiences in the country. I would like, and now we're posing, Nan and I will be taking turns posing questions to you. So whoever among you would like to address a particular question, just raise your hand or wave or something to let us know that you're interested in answering the question. I'm going to pose the first one, which is one of you, I think it was Mairead, said that that they had learned a lot about how the labor unions in the country have a voice and how the country is run, and also how young people in the country have a voice and how the country is run. So I'm wondering if people would like to speak more to that and maybe provide some examples of what you saw. Don't everybody speak at once. Okay, Susan.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I didn't see this just now, but I see it all the time. I imagine people that are veterans in the United States who have a myriad of problems, and the government always doesn't seem to be helping them. But here in Nicaragua, I don't know how they figured this out. You know, there are probably 50,000 martyrs that died fighting in the revolution, and another 50,000 died in the Contra War. And then there were the ones that died in 2018. But the government knows who the mothers of those men and women were. And every month, this Juventud Sandinista takes them a big sack, you could see it on TV, of food provisions because they gave their son or daughter to the revolution.
Would anybody else like to speak to the participation of labor unions in the work of the country, in building the country? Or young people? Okay, over to Nan for the next question.
And can we ask the panelists to all turn their videos on now? Did anyone hear anything like updates related to the canal project?
I can speak on that.
Okay.
So as part of our, sorry, a very loud car just went by. As part of our delegation, we met with the Department of the Ministry of Finance, and we spoke to the Director of Planning and I forget the vice deputy. I forget the actual role off the top of my head of finance, and they mentioned for the canal program that right now, since the majority of their like priority for the budget is social spending, that currently they like if an investor wishes to do that, say China, because they mentioned a lot of good relations with China, that they would love to do that, but currently there's nothing like actively like in the next year or so like on the docket, so they're for it, they want that, but it's just a matter of finding investors for that so that they can have spending like allocated for social reasons as a priority.
Can I
Barbara?
add on briefly?
Sure.
Yeah, like Danny said, I mean, if the investments, if the investors present themselves, it is an exciting project that they do want to pursue. But they told us also about some other projects under the Belt and Road program that they are actively pursuing. While we were at the Ministry of Finance, the actual minister was in a meeting in China, talking about some of these projects that will benefit both countries as well as countries around the world, to be successful for the universal benefit, not just the two countries. So, you know, one thing we asked about was the canal, though we also talked about the roads that many who had already visited Nicaragua said had been vastly improved. And you know, they're planning to do major projects to connect the major roads from east to west and north to south with underground sections. And we discussed rapid bus transport connecting these major roads to the cities around the world. And out of these free trade agreements that they're talking about with China, they expect not just trade, but also improved products reaching the country, heightened opportunity, a drop in the power of the dollar to liberate countries such as Nicaragua, and positive benefits all around.
Anybody else?
Susan.
Oh, Susan.
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, two things I want to mention. I live in Dario, which is very close to Cebaco. For years, Cebaco was like the Y between going to Matagalpa, going to Esteli in the north, and it was a huge roadblock there in 2018. And I was thinking to myself, boy, they can really mess up Nicaragua just blocking the whole north and the whole, you know, east part going through Matagalpa. And so it's true what she's saying, that there's a lot more of a spider web, let's say, of roads now. There's different ways to get west and north and east without having to go on the same old highway everybody's always gone from Costa Rica border up through Managua to get to the north. And that's extremely important. The other thing in Bluefields when we were there, and also since I watch Nicaraguan TV every day, I see that they have a Dutch company that is in the works to make the deeper port in Bluefields, which is really, really important. We only have the big port of Corinto on the west coast, and there's one that's actually on the Rama River, which was the old way you went to Bluefields. You took a bus to Rama and then took a boat down the river. But now with this deeper port in Bluefields, it'll make transport across the country with that new road to Bluefields much, much better. And you know, you don't really have a concept of that until you think like, okay, just 10 years ago, how did we get petroleum from the East Coast, Venezuela, Houston, or wherever? It had to come through Honduras. Now we save a whole lot of money by bringing it through our own country. We won't have to ask the Panamanians or the Costa Ricans or the Hondurans to bring our stuff through their country. That's it.
Larry?
So
Okay, good.
I've heard from several sources, and I'm just looking for confirmation from others that there will definitely be a railroad built between the Port of Bluefields and Corinto, and that would be major. Others can confirm that?
I can't confirm that, but this week the Chinese did say that they're going to help Nicaragua with a railroad system, but they said nothing about where. So that should be forthcoming.
Okay, before posing the next question, I have a comment of my own. 20 years ago, January 2003, a friend and I traveled from Managua to Bluefields. And at that time, really the only way of doing it in any kind of speedy way was to fly on a very small plane in which we were sitting there with lots of bags. I mean, bags of, I don't know if it was grain or exactly what, sacks. And I guess whenever I'm in a small plane, I don't feel quite as safe as in a big one. So that was part of it. But anyway, then from there, we had an opportunity to go to Ramaki, the island, and overnight. And what I want to say is that since this was during the neoliberal period, when the government was not in the hands of the Sandinistas, and it was the government that was in power was not showing very much concern for ordinary people anywhere in the country. But what we observed in Ramaki was that the people were extremely poor. And one family did invite us to spend the night where we slept on their hard floor, no bed or anything. And all they had to share with us for dinner was we had each of us half of one biscuit. And I've never really forgotten that because they shared what they had, which was almost nothing. Anyway, so you can see how much improvement there has been based on the reports that we heard today under this government. So I feel very grateful for that. There is a question here, which we hear a lot, but I guess I feel that it's probably important for us to go ahead and address it again because it keeps coming up. And the question is from an anonymous person here who says, what about the political prisoners that we hear about? Is it true that people are still being held for speaking against the government? Who would like to address that question? Camila?
Well, we would have to ask, what cases specifically this person is referring to, because in the international media and the headlines, including CNN and Espanol, including Univision, Voz de America, all these different outlets in Latin America and French news and Portuguese language news, we hear a lot of these total lies just reiterated over and over again. And we know what the source of them is. The source of them is actually Washington via the right-wing opposition in Nicaragua. And if this is in reference to, for example, many of the leaders of the coup of 2018, the majority of which were shipped back to the United States in a deal that was made, negotiated between Managua, the government here, and the State Department in Washington. Those people committed real crimes. Some of them committed financial crimes. Others participated in crimes that are treason, crimes against the homeland, things which are illegal under Nicaraguan law, under the Constitution, but are also illegal in all countries of the world. A lot of the crimes, we're generalizing here because a lot of claims have been made that I'm trying to address all at once about supposed people who were, according to these headlines, and according to the mainstream media, persecuted for opposing the government. But in fact, what these people did was represent an outside entity, the United States interest. They did things like bringing in money through nonprofits, through NGOs, through foundations here, money that was unaccounted for, in which they didn't report as you would need to report and file with the government in any country of the world. So many laws were broken as well. We're talking about people who committed violent crimes against people in the streets in 2018, and what is universally here considered to be terrorism, acts of terrorism and violence that really violated the human rights of everyday working class Nicaraguans here who were just trying to go to work, going to school, mothers who were trying to take their children to school, pick them up from school, take them to whatever it is, sports practice that they do. And people really had to pause on their lives because of the degree of violence that was injected into this country, paid for by the right-wing opposition. And it's very clear what happened here because of course, a template was used that we've seen in many other countries, such as the guarimbas in Venezuela in 2014 and 2016, or 2017, most recently. And so, we could have a whole nother conversation about what took place, but of course, ultimately, the people who have been jailed and prosecuted for the crimes they committed a series of crimes, many of which were criminal acts. Some of them were just common criminals, and many others. And of course, the claim as far as the election process and the presidential elections that were held in November 2021, a lot of people claim to have been candidates who were going to oppose President Daniel Ortega in that electoral process in November. But in fact, I interviewed Brenda Rocha, the head of the Supreme, or the Consejo, the Supreme Electoral Council, as well as other magistrates. And these individuals who claimed to be presidential candidates were never candidates. They were never pre-candidates. They were not actually registered with any political party in order to run in those elections. They were just individuals who were instructed by the State Department and by those who are advising them in the United States to claim to be running for president in order to say that there was some sort of political persecution and that they were an advantage, or that their candidacy was never allowed because the this electoral authority did not allow them to run. Of course, they violated several laws in the run-up to that electoral process, and that is the reason why some of them were not able to run. Others simply just didn't register and didn't do the very basic things that you have to do in order to run for a political office in this party. And unfortunately, right now, today, in 2023, we're seeing the same template used in Venezuela, in which people are claiming that they want to run for president, knowing they have committed the crimes of treason and terrorism and other things, money laundering, among many other crimes, in order to claim some sort of political persecution. It's completely false. It must be refuted. It must be combated on every level. And I would invite anyone who has some very good links, and I know a lot of people have done a lot of writing, among them Stephen Sefton, John Perry, and many of our friends and panelists today, to share their links that counter that misinformation, complete lies of the mainstream media internationally.
Thank you, Camila. Would anybody like to add anything to that? Okay. Well, I see that we're at the end of our time here. We've gone for 90 minutes. So it is time to say goodbye, I think. But if people have one last word, we can ask each of you for one last word if you have one. Susan?
This book, written by Dan Kovalik, is an excellent history of Nicaragua that just came out. I hope you can see it. I'm trying to hold it so you can see it. I highly recommend. If you want some more background, this is the one. Dan Kovalik, Nicaragua. I can't read the rest backwards, but a history of U.S. intervention and resistance. So that's a good follow-up.
Anybody else want to have a last word that you'd like to share? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. It's been a very stimulating discussion, and we will share the recording afterward at nicasolidarity.net, and also on YouTube. It will be available within a few days at the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition channel. Okay, thank you very much. Bye for now.